Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Hans.
Hi,
Hi, Lincoln.
Anna.
Hi. I love the background. Is this Ireland or
No,
Georgia
it's,
or
it's
Scotland?
Swanetti, actually.
Swanetti, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, great. Great to see everybody. I think one fourth maybe of participants are non-Georgians. But the meeting will be recorded and I hope to display it on YouTube for the audience that's not attending today yet is interested in the update about the elections. And I thought that it would proceed as follows, that I will speak for 15 minutes and then we'll stop for Q&A. And we'll answer questions from the audience. And then we'll have a prize for the most creative background. Lincoln, you are the so far. Okay, good evening, everybody. For those of you who are joining us from States, good afternoon, I guess, or good morning. I did schedule this meeting on purpose at this time, although it's not very convenient specifically for Georgia, but hoping that other people would join either from Europe or from North America. But in any event, I will distribute the link to this meeting so that the rest of the audience monitoring Georgia elections will be updated about it. So a little bit of a background about the elections and my relation to it and my experience. As you know, this is still partially majoritarian election, and this will be the last time when this is so, as we are promised. In 2024, the parliament will be elected completely through a proportionate parliamentary system. But for now, Georgian parliament will be 120 MPs will be elected through party lists, and 30 majoritarian districts are on the table. Majoritarian districts have been unified. So in the regions, sometimes districts that were 3 and 4 previously have been joined into one. So for instance, district where I'm running as a background where to explain to you is used to be 2 districts. And now it's one big district of approximately 120,000 individuals, voters. Yes, it's huge. So the constituency is a little more than 120,000. So it used to be half and half, approximately 45,000 and so on. So I'm running most of individuals who are running on the majoritarian elections, in the majoritarian elections, are also on the party list, as those of you who are aware of the way Georgian elections proceed. This is how it is. I am an exception, as well as a couple of other independent candidates. So elections should be held on October 31st. Today is probably the very first day when serious discussion as to whether it's worth postponing the elections started. Before that, yes, a couple of party representatives raised this point. TVP Rally even published a report, pros and cons. Before that, we really haven't heard from the opposition or any other side the idea that perhaps elections should be postponed. COVID will be, I think it's an interesting theme and factor to discuss in terms of the impeding factors for the proper conduct of elections. It wasn't the case, let's say, in the beginning of September when the numbers in Georgia were low, but now the numbers are quite high. The number of deaths is approximately 10 per day, which is for Georgia quite high. So it has become really the first impeding factor that makes it really difficult to run these elections is campaigning, right? It's become really, really hard to campaign from both sides. From the side of the constituency, People are hesitant to come out whenever we organize public gatherings, even if they are, even if they meet all the requirements with social distancing and masks and so on. People are skeptical, they raise questions. It's become really hard to do door-to-door. We have met many people that are in self-isolation. It's been some kind of a, you know, dark humor among the campaign when you knock on the on the building and somebody responds and they're like, "Hi, I'm in self-isolation." This hasn't happened in door-to-door campaigns before. So this is from the side of the constituency. From our perspective, of course, it's hard to get to communicate with people and also to draw and engage volunteers and then to communicate with their parents that we're taking all the measures and so on. So COVID. So I think one of the reasons it will impact elections is turnout. Government has gone back to some restriction measures these days. From today, restaurants will be closing from 10 p.m. in Tbilisi. There have been warnings to be cautious with the use of public transport. So in these circumstances, to advocate to people that you have to go to elections, sometimes use public transport to go to their place of registration becomes harder. A controversial point so far undecided is portable voting boxes, ballot boxes. This has been a historical apple of discord, as you know, in Georgia, as Hans knows very well himself. So this time too, since a lot of people are in self-isolation, a lot of people are in either quarantined in hospitals, a couple of thousand. The issue of how they will vote and how their vote will be protected is a question. Anyways, in Georgia, it's whether this adds to another issue because of which we can be suspicious of the government's intentions, as it happens historically in Georgia. So portable ballot boxes have always been a problem, I think most of you know, but this year, because of the bigger number of people in self-isolation that are not going to come out, and people in hospitals who are actually being treated and for COVID, it's an issue. Who's going to carry them? How they're going to be protected? How they're going to be counted, and so on. So COVID will remain a factor. And last thing in relation to COVID is emergency measures. As you know, in summer, Georgian government passed a very interesting and from the perspective of many unconstitutional measure, which allowed the government and the ministries, the cabinet and the ministries to adopt measures restricting certain freedoms without parliamentary oversight. So the restriction to the freedom of movement, for instance, could have been only possible under previous regime with the parliamentary oversight when the emergency measures have been passed regime. But in summer, this power was delegated to the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health, for instance, and the Mayor's Office can pass these restrictions, the ones that I mentioned, on the use of public transport, on the opening and closing times of restaurants, buildings, and so on, themselves, without parliamentary oversight. The other issue here is that if the government would adopt emergency measures, this would automatically mean that the elections have to be postponed. So far, the government is treating COVID piecemeal because the elections are on the agenda. We will see what will happen after October 31st, and if there is a second round in these elections, because of course, as we know from scholarly writings about other countries, COVID can be a good excuse to restrict demonstrations and expression of discontent, but we will see. So first is COVID. Second, a more or less traditional problem here is, of course, use of public resources and intimidation of individuals who are related to somehow to public resources. there have been, I would call this softer measures of influence or intimidation, rather than kind of full blatant attacks, which also have taken place. So these softer methods, which are more characteristic to this government, are, and in my campaign specifically, we have met a number of people, I would say 5 or 6, and these are people who receive social benefits. For instance, at least 3 individuals refused to sign a letter supporting my candidacy, the letter which I needed with a number of signatures to stand as an independent candidate, because they expressed their fear that their social benefits package would be removed, because this list of signatures requires an ID number. So it is very easy to identify a person who has signed their signature. We have also noticed any person that works for public office will refuse to have their photo taken. My campaign the day before yesterday, door to door, a woman opens Ministry of Defense. She was very happy. First thing she says, no camera, no photos. I really respect you, I admire you, but I cannot be seen on camera with you. So it's not a question of even, actually cheering for somebody, but appearing alongside an opposition candidate is a problem. And the last point of kind of relatively softer intimidation tactics is observation and video recording of opposition meetings. I mean, I have documented now 6 instances with face, an instance of video recording, and the relation of the person with the Georgian Dream or the incumbent candidate from Georgian Dream, Giavolsky. Specific facts. Usually the way it happens, and those of you who are experienced in elections know this better than me probably, but I think the reason for this is first just to intimidate with your presence the audience that attends your meetings, opposition meetings, but also in some cases to provide a follow-up with a form of pressure to people who attend opposition meetings, and I will give you examples. So usually the way it happens is plain clothes, this woman or a man sits in the middle of a meeting and records with a telephone everybody who attends the meeting and the meeting in its entirety. We have managed then to, as we have identified this trend, we have managed to identify these individuals name by last name. Often these are not public officials, they are Georgian Dream focal points, coordinators. Of course, what happens as a result, for instance, we went a couple of days ago to an IDP settlement, is people are absolutely hesitant even to come down and stand in a circle at a town hall meeting. But they will watch from the windows. It's a very sad show, actually. They will look from the windows, they will stand far away, but not to be documented, to be around the opposition candidate. And I have started expressing this document. Since we started documenting these people, I have started saying, look, we discovered this individual, as a way to basically counter this strategy. And of course the tactics will change, but so far I wanted to make sure that it's known that this tactic exists. So in one instance, why we are suspicious that this is used to intimidate people after all, we went to some meeting, then we had a follow-up a couple of days later. 3 individuals from one neighborhood said immediately, please do not contact us again. They were they were at the meeting supporting me, right? On their own volition. They were offering help. They gave us numbers. And then here it is, no contact. Please do not contact us again. What we have heard is people are being contacted for their family members, for their people if they have in prison, if they have somebody on probation, if they have somebody in public service, and intimidated like that. So that's 3. And then kind of serious and kind of blatant intimidation. We had one instance of that specifically. Other parties have had many. I really don't know how UNM is conducting their campaign. I don't think they're campaigning. I think they're still organizing their own constituency that they know they're all loyal. Because also supposedly the only reason why we were attacked in the beginning, this is August 14, because somebody thought that I was an ally of UNM. And this was a kind of a serious attack, yes, with swearing and yelling and so this is another factor, kind of put the use of criminal groups, or these are not even gangs. I mean, these are young people prone to crime or on probation who are who hang out in these yards anyways, in our neighborhoods anyways. They're usually used for this purpose. So I will describe how we were attacked. Basically, we went to to say hi to a neighborhood, started talking to two neighbors, and suddenly, out of the blue, it was an evening, out of the dark, inside of the neighborhood, a group of young people stormed out, yelling, under influence, most potentially, yelling. Basically, they made us withdraw, and they made the neighbors withdraw as well. So here, the targets of the intimidation are much less the campaign itself, rather than the neighbors, right? So the neighbors are pressured not to meet with opposition candidates. We reported the incident August 14, we went to the Ministry of Interior, gave testimony. So far, nothing, no result. Although they could withdraw cameras, camera recordings, of course. So these are the kind of factors that will influence, to a degree, elections, I think. And I'll mention last one. A surprising aspect of this elections is, I think this way it's similar to 2012, how hard it is for anyone to predict the outcome. The Georgian population has been most secretive. So as you know, most polls show a very large number of undecided, and even individually, when I have spoken to people, they are very nice, very cordial, but very hesitant to reveal to whom they will vote. We can interpret this as an opposition vote, as it turned out to be in 2012, but also that would be a guess, right? But I think also among opposition people that are more experienced, they're also noticing this trend, whether from intimidation, whether if they're preparing something, a vendetta for the government, as it happened in 2012. Whatever it is, it's the number of undecided is very high. So this is my outline for the election climate. Not only my experience, but what I hear from other opposition parties and leaders, and I'm happy to answer your questions and to engage in the topic of your interest. Go ahead, Lincoln.
So I'm wondering what you're describing. You're running as a single mandate candidate. So, you're running in one district. Obviously, you're running against the high-profile Georgian Dream candidate. He is a high-profile guy. Do you get a sense that the voters that you are talking to, I mean, it's certainly a scenario where they would vote for you and the Georgian Dream for the party list, right? What is the sense that you're getting about that? Because you're asking something different than, vote for the opposition per se.
Excellent question from an expert, obviously. One big trend which I have noticed is complete disengagement or nihilism, right? So most people, yesterday we had a meeting of about 30 people, which is pretty big for Georgia, as a small neighborhood meeting. But out of 30, 25 were there to tell me how fed up they are with politics. And since I'm the only candidate who actually campaigns and talks to people, I get to be the one to hear this discontent. If this was Georgian Dream, in fact, this was supposed to be Georgian Dream, to hear this discontent, right? But of course, but they don't go to door. So who ends up hearing this complete disengagement and nihilism about politics and how politics is all corrupt in Georgia, me. Right? I don't think, no, I think if anybody will vote for me is anybody who's not core Georgian Dream beyond that. So core Georgian Dream, whatever that is, Bidzina, public officials, whoever somehow have benefited from this government, political prisoners, many of them are disenfranchised, but thankful. That's an interesting point. So I know most of these people individually, right? So many of them are disenfranchised with what happened, dissatisfied, but they're still grateful for being amnestied, for instance, right? Or for being released. So let's take this core group. Outside of that, if this is considering COVID, and so if this is 30-something% realistically, outside of that, then I think there's a market of critically minded individuals. UNM, in my district, there's a strange situation, is that UNM doesn't have their own candidate, right? And as a staunch opposition, I get a lot of support from staunch, radical UNM people who don't like the candidate that UNM backed up because of his hipster attitude, let's call it this way, or his policies, right? It's a strange combination that happened particularly in my district. I have heard people who will vote for Lelo and vote for me, people UNM vote for me, a lot of people in the middle. So European Georgia, Vashadze, they don't have representation on the left bank. No, absolutely not. I mean, so far we have met maybe 1 or 2 people out of thousands. So there's a big middle ground on the left bank. Go ahead, guys. Don't be hesitant. Go ahead and please. Les Hans, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Anna, for that account. And I think what makes it, you know this, but I will still say it, what makes your account so valuable is that you're incredibly specific about the incidents, and kind of how you render them is kind of with details and numbers. And I think that in itself provides just a very good picture. Yeah. So sometimes you then hear, oh, everything is like this, and you say, in 3 cases this, and 5 cases this, etc. And I think that's, as said, that's very helpful to understand. I have a very, very tiny, detailed question, but I'm curious what your experience has been so far. And I mean, that's in part just asking about the art of elections in Georgia overall, and the challenge with media, and of course are compounded in your case when yes, you're nationally, I think it's fair to say you're nationally known, but your campaign is supposed to be particularly local. And the question is, social media, what works there? What have you observed? What goes on? Are there some nascent or emerging lessons that you can draw on campaigning? And again, I mean, being clear about that this is an extraordinary election, both structurally and then situationally, that we have in this particular context. But I'm just curious what maybe some preliminary insights are.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. So many of you who have deep insights into Georgian political climate are aware that Georgian media is partisan, and most of the big media companies are related to TVs, and this polarization climate is very well. I'm a great test case for polarization, because since the day I announced my campaign, I haven't been at all featured on Imedi TV, like at all. I don't exist for Imedi TV, which is under the influence of Georgian Dream. And as a powerful TV, it's still the most watched TV channel in the country. So imagine what a great, for me, impediment it is. And I haven't been on a TV program on Tavari TV either. I've given maybe 1 or 2 commentary, although when I was in the High Council of Justice, almost every day I was on Tawari TV. So this is, for me, is a great example of polarization. 2 big parties with their 2 big TVs, and here's a candidate who is in the middle, and I'm excluded. I have access excluded on both TVs. And so I have access to TVs in the middle, luckily, Palitra, Tevepirveli, Rustavi too, I mean, and Pormola. So these 4 TVs where I can't complain, I have without paying for commercial and so on and so forth, I have access. So in this sense, social media has been a great help. It's relatively cheaper than TV commercials. So it's more affordable. You can target it specifically to people who live in Tbilisi. For instance, some commercials that I'm releasing now, I used to do videos that would include and target immigrants as well and so forth, but now we are targeting basically Tbilisi residents. The downside is unbelievable degree of trolling and bullying. I mean, this is unbelievable. I have we have figured out a strategy of how to go through this process so that I emerge from it sane. So a couple of times, last time on Didube-Chugureti, in relation to Didube-Chugureti, I was bullied like to a terrible extent by the neo-fascist groups. This is what they are. Because they have a hold on the issue of Didube-Chugureti, and how dare somebody who's not going to incite war comment on Didube-Chugureti. And so with absolutely horrible expressions, I was bullied, but luckily I have a social media team, so I can give it that to professionals. So that's the downside of it, right? So you need also resources, not only to run your own campaign, but also to respond to your counter campaigns, to make sure that also what happened, why I think this happened to all the political debates, American one first and foremost, is how you have to be really careful that your political speech will be, and be aware that your political speech will be cut down into 30-second phrases, and be really careful there. I think if there's a separate training for this, there must be, right? How any media appearance where it used to be, you have to have your speech, then you have to have your 2-minute speech, and now every phrase is possible to be taken out of context and then spinned against you. Right, this happened to me also a couple of times by my competitors. So I think it's a useful tool, but also you have to know that you can be ambushed.
Thank you. Super interesting.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Excellent. Yes, Hans, go ahead. Hans, and Becca first.
I think Becca was asking.
Becca,
yes.
Becca, go ahead. Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was on a mute, so I was like trying to unmute myself. First of all, thanks very much for the meeting. And I was wondering, is there something we can do that a candidate from the governing party will meet you and debate you on the electoral issues? Because I've heard you asking him to come and speak to you on the TV, so we can decide who's the best for the job, but it's not happening. Why? What do you think? Why is it not happening? And what can we do to make it happen? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a great question, and I actually forgot to raise this, is how the ruling party is conducting elections without appearing in debates. I mean, I think that itself undermines the democratic character of these elections. The ruling party does not participate in political debates, TV debates, in either of formats. On Imedi TV, they were offered all sorts of conditions by opposition parties. Not only the incumbent, my competitor, but nowhere ruling party candidates, nowhere they're participating in debates. And of course, this really undermines what the whole idea of democratic elections, that basically people campaign on issues and then constituencies make up their mind based on an informed decision. The way the ruling party campaigns is billboards. I mean, just from distance, not from social distance, but from, yeah, you can say from social distance. From billboards, from TV, so stand-alone TV interventions and appearances on their own TVs, or where they control the setting. Well, the last intervention, the opposition candidates debate among ourselves, and the government candidate will appear separately, right? So this undermines the character of elections. We have pressured and asked him and begged him, my competitor, to appear on the debate, but so far it seems that they're not going to resort to this. Well, understandably also because their campaign is not around issues. It's not even on promises. The BI's campaign opening speech was devoted 40 minutes to UNM and only 10 minutes to the future of Georgia. So this shows, right? The main campaign strategy also at these elections will be UNM restoring justice, remedying their human rights violations and so on and so forth. So thanks for that question, Becca. Hans, go ahead. You had a point.
Yes, just, I mean, you said this very interesting about the core constituency of Georgian Dream. And I think, I mean, in some ways, your encounters with Georgian Dream supporters must in a way also be interesting, because at least for some time, you also had experience being, being in a government that was part of that kind of very broader outfit. And so I was just curious whether you can give it a little more texture of how some of those encounters, I now don't mean with the gangs, but how some of those encounters work and what you hear and what some of the contours and the texture of that is. I know that that's a little bit of a vague question, but I'm still curious whether there are any other insights that have come from these meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have had a couple of, no, we have had many encounters doing door-to-door with lower ranking GD people, coordinates or focal points. And these people, well, first and foremost, they're not ideological, right? It's not that it's an ideologically based party. Most of these people work for Georgian Dream for 2 or 3 months, and they have been hostile. So lower level staff, they have been outright hostile to my campaign. If we think of kind of decision makers, and whenever there are the appearances are possible, when it's possible to record them, or so on, former MPs, for instance, I think their attitude is, we are tolerable. So UNM is intolerable, and here I am also considered to be tolerable. I think here, because no matter what, I think the issue here is that no matter maybe how important were my fights at the time and my struggles, also for political prisoners, now for these people, a lot is at stake. A lot is at stake. So for the people who will remain on Georgian Dream team is a lot of jobs, perks, privileges. So whatever happened 10 or 15 years ago, maybe I'm also a reminder of what Georgian Dream could have been. So it's very uncomfortable, rather. right? So maybe it's actually uncomfortable to see, like, I'm a reminder of all this, what the first generation of the party was supposed to fight for and was supposed to achieve. And now it turned into this kind of bureaucracy and party left without any content, just in form. So the relations are on the surface with this mid-level representatives of the party are, my attitude and theirs is very civilized. In terms of what their officers at the entry level are told, they're outright hostile. And so whenever I appear at the campaign, like, people usually withdraw. But if it's just my staff in T-shirts, they're usually hostile to them.
Great. Again, thanks.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
I apologize, I am a bit late, and maybe you discussed this issue, but I want to ask you, Anna, about the observation of the coming election. As we have the polarization in Georgian politics, and you talked a lot about these big parties, right? Georgian Dream and UNM. Can we think that this polarization we have in the parties and in politics moved in the organizations which observe the coming election? I think that, and because of the pandemic, we will have fewer international observers, right? And this could be a problem. And if you check and of course you would do this, the list of the local organizations, Georgian organizations which observe the election, they are many, around 90, and I'm pretty sure that more will be added on this list. And how much this fake observation can be a problem, and what do you think about this? And if you will have observers, and how many will they be, and how this process will be conducting on this election?
Thank you. Thank you, Katya. Yes, I think it's a kind of usual problem when observer groups are front groups for political parties. Now, I have noticed a couple, I'm not going to name which, but I've noticed a couple created recently as really front groups for specific political parties. And of course, it's damaging the process. Luckily, we will still have multiple sources of information. So today I was visited by IRI observers, they're on the ground. NDI kind of virtual observation mission and local mission, I think, is also here. OSCE observers on the ground, they also came to my office. They're all documenting whatever is happening online, so I'm sending reports. Of course, it's really important for somebody to be there doing counting, of course. What the problem will be there is whether the government will adopt restrictions, and even if not, there will be a campaign to say, stay away from the person who's counting the ballots, don't go too close, social distancing, and of course that's where everything is happening during counting, right? So I think it will be tougher. We hope to exchange information with other parties, independent or not, just to know what's going on where. There are 98 precincts only in my district. It's a lot. So this requires at least 100 people. I think we will be able to cover this, right? So we will have representatives. I don't need to have observers. So I will have representatives who will represent the campaign. It's possible to defend the votes, of course, because we know whatever happens during the campaign is the counting moment where your ballots can be stolen or damaged or so on. I think an important question in relation to yours is exit polls and this TV polling. It's how fashionable it has become and how ridiculous in terms of what they say. Is now Rustavi 2's poll showed, I think, that Georgian Dream wins in the first round in all, maybe except one district. And they didn't even publish how many people are undecided, the number. And the error threshold was 6%. Supposedly they hired an English company. So another one is by formula and Imedi polls. So everybody will publish their own polls and their own exit polls. It is expected that there will be discord in the end about election results. I totally expect that, right? Added to that COVID and then restrictions to protest and to gather outside. So I don't expect that our parliament will be in session on December. I think this will be protracted, and maybe we'll take some mediation from international institutions. Also because, as you said, fact finding is really important. So if we're not going to have an authoritative fact finder who will help us, who will create a narrative that most people trust, then this is what the fight will be about. Yes, Lincoln.
I have a bunch of questions. I'm not going to ask all of them, but there's two I do want to ask, and they're related. Okay, so you are probably the most high profile, at least in the West, non-GD candidate running in a single mandate district. I mean, and also in that niche of the West that people who pay attention to Georgia and actually like democracy there and understand it with some nuance, you're the most well known. Therefore, yours is not just an ordinary single mandate race, right? And it would behoove the Georgian Dream to not make this fight in your district, right? If you win that district, they should let you win. That's in their interest, right? If they want to steal it, they should steal on the party list side. I mean, frankly. But so my one question is that analysis right? Because that's what, I mean, do they understand that? Because empirically, that is the right way to operate. The second question is this: if you do get in, and I have to confess that I've been, as you know, if you've been following my writing, I'm writing and speaking and doing media mostly on the American election. We have an election coming up here as well. You may have read about that.
They're a little more problematic.
News every now and then.
Yeah.
But I remember in summer of 2016, a leader of a prominent American NGO standing up at the Georgia GDSC conference and saying how it was certain there would be more than two major parties. No party would have a majority. And I remember looking at the data and saying, this is just a lie. This person's just lying because they're carrying water for another party here. I don't know who it was. So I am bearish on that notion in general. I think that you say about Bidzina getting up there and saying for 40 minutes about how terrible the UNM was. Listen, I'm not involved in this election in Georgia, but if I were, and if I were advising Bidzina, that's exactly what I would tell him to do.
Yeah,
right? There is a political logic to that. So my question is, there's a scenario where you win, the Georgian Dream has a majority, the UNM is number 2. This is not unusual in Georgia. But you're in the parliament. What do you see your role, both as an individual MP with a responsibility to a district, and I apologize for the long rambling question, to your district who elected you, but also as somebody who's not just another MP, right? How do you see your role in parliament as somebody who starts out with more visibility, more name recognition, more contacts, frankly, smarter than 99% of these people? How do you see your role in serving Georgia in that, should that come to pass, which to me is a very possible scenario?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. First, in relation to the kind of preface, I think at the strategy level, some things could be decided by Georgian Dream, but I think it's second what happens at the level of tactics. And a lot of things, especially in this government, because it's not hierarchical, it's not centralized, it's divided by interest groups and clans who compete with each other. A lot of things happen at this mid and lower level. So a lot depends on my competitors, the incumbents, connections, favors, who he owes to, who he promised to, security services. He absolutely is supported by the local mayor's bureau, the municipality bureau. So there's the exchange between the MP and the bureaus in both districts, and it's bureaus that distribute social benefits and aids and temporary rent in terms of in case of homelessness. So they have all the perks, right? The MP doesn't have any perks. It's the local bureaus under the mayor's office, and they support each other. So I think some interferences might not be determined at the very top level, especially because, interestingly, at these elections, all majoritarian candidates were put at the end of the GD party list. This is very interesting. The rumor had it before the list was published that already BI had decided that, guys, I'm tired of paying your bills. Now show what you individually are capable of. So all single mandate candidates, they're at the end of GD's party list, which means if they don't make in their mandate, they're not going to they're not going to be in the parliament. They're like 110 and after in the party list. So a lot has been as a burden has been given back to the candidates themselves. So I think a lot of pressures, exchange of favors and organizing will happen on the local level. And therefore a lot depends on me in revealing this, in showing to the wider audience what happens in my own neighborhood by my incumbent, right? So I think this, for instance, this surveillance is tracked immediately to the incumbent through photos and connections, not to security services so far. So it's his campaign with, which is funded through government resources and parties' resources, watching mine and people who attend mine. So that's in relation to the preface. Second, so even if they're smart that they shouldn't use kind of rough tactics in this neighborhood, we don't know how smart kind of local level implementing teams are. And second is what are my plans? I look at it as a huge platform to prepare for a big breakthrough for future. What will happen through all polls is GD, UNM, and then smaller percentage of smaller parties who are not growing. I mean, that's very interesting. I think you guys know more about this, why they're not growing. Nobody's growing. Patriots are not growing. Girchi is not growing. Everybody's like 3-4%, right? So I think what I could do in the next parliament, have it as a spring base for local elections next year. We're going to have municipal and mayoral elections in October of next year. So immediately as this campaign finishes, then we rest a little bit and start another one. Prepare for that, because also, frankly, most of the issues that I raised at these elections, they will have to be implemented by local government. All these parks and youth houses and better roads and all of these things. These are local government issues from my local government agenda, right? To work with the other smaller parties who will be in the parliament. And so to prepare a good and solid middle ground for next elections and for 2024. I think, yeah, because what we know is for sure is GD as a political organism will die away. UNM is not growing. It hasn't had its leader here for 8 years. It's changing its leadership and still, it's not growing. So the situation must be ready for kind of a strong ideologically based party or group to emerge in the middle. That's my outlook. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello. I'm interested in what do you think about the education system in Georgia, and especially about online education, and how effective do you think it's, because we are also students here, and your attitude towards this issue is important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Didi Madloba. Thank you. So for those of you who do not study in Georgian universities, online education in Georgia is a complete failure. Is a complete failure. Also because the government refused to have any stake in this. On the other day, I was looking at like Michigan's regulations for online education. I mean, everywhere. As you know, I teach in Kazakhstan online. I taught in person, and now it's on online. And you know, it's logical that a lot of things there are organized from top down, and they're organized very well. So I can compare. In Georgian universities, it's a complete chaos. Why? Because in many fields, including education, the government decided that it doesn't have a role. It should let the universities and students agree about standards and about procedures. So of course, both are interested to keep the standards low. Not all students, but universities are certainly interested not to raise the standards, right? So as a result, what I am really fearful of education in some fields, it's a complete failure, online education here. I think it's a waste of time, these couple of months for students, and especially for high school and school students. The other, I think a serious issue here is a discrepancy in terms of income. I mean, even I discovered on the other day, I have about 25 to 30 volunteers. And just by this, I tried to kind of, it occurred to me to ask a question, how many of them have a laptop? These are grown-ups. These are, most of them students, are around 30. And then I realized, you know, actually, even in my team, with most of young people don't own their own laptop. So it's a problem across universities. Of course, it's a problem across. My son goes to school. It's a private school. Most of his classmates don't have their own laptop. Parents have their laptops, but if there are a couple of siblings, of course, each of them do not have a laptop. This country is poor, right? So this is a serious issue. No, the government isn't interested to hear this. The annual budget of the Ministry of Education is 4 billion lari, highest. They're not interested in poking their nose in making online education or distance education of decent quality. That's my attitude. Although it is a method of the future, we all know. I mean, the world is not going to be the same. Most of the offices will retain long distance work as part of their routine, and education institutions as well, right? So, Madlub, Nana. Okay, by the way, Nana, we have a special working group that works on higher education reform. And if you're interested in joining, write me in chat, okay?
Yes, I know this organization.
Okay. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending, for spending your 1 hour here with me. And if you do have any other questions for future, do let me know through email or chat. I am here. I wanted to update you on what's going on the ground. And always, as always, we'll be happy to hear your thoughts. დიდი მადლობა ყველას, თათია თქვენს პერსონალურად, მადლობა ყველას მომდანებისთვის.
დიდი მადლობა ამ შესაძლებლობისთვის.
კი, კარგად, ვიყოთ კავშირში. Bye bye, Lincoln. See you. Bye bye. კარგად, ნახვამდის.
Keep muting myself. See everybody later.
Madlaba, thank you very much, Anna.
Nαხვამდის, Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.